There we go. Okay. Is everybody's screen my my desktop? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So this is the Sock Club information page. I know there's not a lot of bells and whistles and photos on this page, but it has a lot of information, and it will have links to it from the recordings from the Zoom. So when you come to it next time on January 3rd, this will be highlighted and it will be a link to this video. Currently, see notes. This is, please God, yay, it worked. This is the notes that I did for a handout, and you can print this out. I will be reading off of this. You can look at it if you want to. If you are able to print it out now, that's fine. If you're not able to, if you have a piece of paper and pencil, you might want to use them, or you can go back and rewatch the video with this piece of paper. But these are the notes about measuring your feet. And then the second page is notes about making a gauge swatch for socks. And the last part is the counting, measuring, and calculating, or what Liz calls all the math. So I have that up, and I just wanted to let you know where it is and where you will be finding your, if you need resources for the club, that's where you'll go to look for them. Okay. And I have a copy of that paper here. If you are coming into the store at all, I have some other copies of it printed out, and I'm happy to hand them out. Great. So I'm just going to start talking about things. I don't know how exactly the measuring our feet is going to work on the Zoom, but we're going to try it, and maybe we'll talk about it, and maybe you'll do it later. So the Sock Club that we did last year went from January until almost December, and we got 7 socks done. And there's several people here who participated in that group. And we were really successful, I think, in starting and finishing socks and skills along the way. And so I'm starting back at a vanilla sock, or what is called a vanilla sock. Our hope is to engage new members and help them, and then also make some fun socks. I think the vanilla sock is a really cute pattern, and for some of us who have been doing more complicated patterns, it's nice to take a break and just make a pair of socks. So the first thing we talked about and then never recorded last year was our first Zoom about measuring and fitting socks to our feet. And we wanted an opportunity to do that again and have the, I love how tidy my background is. I don't have the means or the intelligence to actually block it out. But we wanted to have the resource of how to measure your feet and how to fit socks to your feet available to people. And so that's why we're repeating this today. During other Zoom classes going forward, we will be repeating other parts of our previous year. Particularly, we're going to talk about fibers and yarns and have a recording of that, because I don't think that got recorded either. And other topics that come up will be included in the recordings on the Zoom. We will take 2 months for each pattern so that we are not hurrying through them and not trying to accomplish too much in a single session, so that we have sort of enough time to get through all of the information that we need. Any questions right now? Any burning questions? People were asking me if there was a fee for registering, or if there was a registration request or requirement, and there isn't. You just show up. You're not required to use yarn from our store, although it's nice if you do. If you do, the first yarn that you buy online, you can use the Sock Club, the word Sock Club, to get a discount of 10% on the items. Otherwise, if you tell us at the store, we'll give you a 10% discount on the sock.
Beth, I've got a question.
Yeah.
Suzanne, the pattern for this month, there's one for fingering weight and one for
DK.
DK. So,
But
but the pattern-
you could do either. If you would rather do a thicker sock, you could do either. But you might want to try doing fingering weight if you haven't done it. Because we're going to mostly be working with fingering weight yarns. So you might want to use fingering weight to get started with. And it would be a good idea to do, I would like it if you did fingering weight for the beginning for the gauge, because it's tricky fingering weight is thin and people have some fear, I think, of using something that's little. They're afraid they won't be able to see it or pick up the stitches. And I think it's good to do it and to sort of get past that fear. Is there anybody from this past year's sock club who would like to chime in? Like, was there anybody who had a nervousness of working with the fingering weights? Any sound? Okay.
I did.
You did.
Yeah. Well, I had a nervousness about everything,
You
but
did. Okay.
and the small needles, and the fingering weight. So it really does help to go through it, and then it's like it becomes normal. So it's been good.
Okay. So so I would recommend doing the fingering weight and going forward with the fingering weight. I think we are doing a thicker weight sock in July because it's a stranded colorwork pattern, and you'll have the option of doing it as a pair of stranded colorwork socks or as a Christmas stocking if you want to. So we are planning to do a thicker weight one, but I think getting started, it would be nice to work in the tighter and the finer yarns, finer diameter. Sorry, I've almost used all my words for today. I apologize. There's been a lot, I've been doing a lot of talking today. Okay, any other questions? Did that answer your question? Okay, all right.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce some terms that you may or may not be familiar with, and I want to talk a little bit about fitting socks to your feet, because it is really important when you make socks that they fit. If you have ever tried to make socks and they didn't fit, you know what I'm talking about. I think every single person in the class this morning had tried to make socks and they did not fit, and they were very unhappy. The first term I want to introduce is the idea of ease. Ease is a term used in dressmaking and in clothes making that refers to the way something fits on the part of the body. So if a measurement is exactly the same, like if I was doing a sweater and I wanted to make it fit me exactly, that would be 0 ease. It would be exactly the same measurement as my body. If I wanted to make it skin tight and look really, hello, then I would make it less than the measurement of my body and it would be skin tight. And if I wanted it to be loose and comfortable, boxy, that kind of thing, I would make it much bigger than the measurement of my body. So ease can be negative, smaller than your actual measurements, or 0, which is the same as your actual measurements, or bigger, positive ease, which is bigger than the actual measurements. So with socks, as you can imagine, negative ease is better. And the reason is the firmer the fit, or the snugger the fit on your foot, the less the sock will move inside of the shoe. So the recommendation is for the sock to fit snugly around your foot and not have a looseness or folds or anything, which could be uncomfortable, could cause blisters. It also causes the sock to wear, and wear is what shortens the life of a sock. It also stays in place better if it fits on the leg and the foot. so it's not annoying to walk in. I have a pair of socks that I knitted that somehow managed to slip down my feet every time I put them on, and it is the most annoying thing on the planet. And I love the socks, but I can't stand that they slide down. The recommendation that came from our source, and the source is listed on the page I just shared with you, but it's Custom Socks Knit to Fit Your Feet by Kate Atherley. This book came out in 2015. There are certainly other books about measuring your feet and getting custom socks. Kate Atherley is an excellent teacher and an excellent writer, and we used this book initially during Sock Club last year, and it was very helpful. But I think many of us who went through it could say that it's almost too finicky. Like it's almost too much information for how to fit socks to your feet in here. You know, when you go to the store and you buy a pair of socks, there's 3 sizes maybe. So, and they relate to your shoe sizes, and they don't fit perfectly. Obviously, that's why we want to make them. But she goes into great detail in this book. And I think we learned that you didn't need to go into such incredibly intricate detail all the time. So this is the book. We don't sell it. I will put the link back up on the current page. It's back in the archives right now for you to find it if you're interested in it. A good library may carry it, so you may be able to find it in your local library. It is an excellent book, and it's $27.99, so it's not terribly expensive, but it's not free either. Okay, so she talks about Kate Atherley talks about negative ease. She also wants you to look out for sock patterns, because sock patterns often will make some assumptions. And she wants you to think for yourself to a certain degree. Sock patterns make assumptions about people's feet. And so it may be that they give a finished measurement. And the finished measurement is the measurement of the actual sock. But if you don't know that that's supposed to be 10% less than your foot, then it can be a little bit confusing. So when we talk about negative ease, we're actually talking about the measurement around the foot circumference, and the sock being 10% less than that. So if you measured around your foot, and we're going to talk about that in detail in a second, and your measurement probably isn't 10 inches, but let's say it was, then you would multiply that by 0.9, and the actual sock measurement would be 9 inches around. And that would stretch to fit your foot comfortably. Length is a little bit different. Length, she only recommends about 1/2 inch less for almost anybody, and maybe a little bit less than that for a small child. So the length isn't as much of an ease issue. And I'd forgotten that. I was reviewing all of this information, and I forgot that length is not a 10% shorter. It's only about 1/2 inch shorter than your actual foot length. And that was important. Going back into it, it's maybe good to know that. So one of the things that Kate Atherley did is she had 500 knitters respond to a survey and tell her about their feet. And she made some observations from this research that was really helpful for her. One of the things she found that most of the respondents were North American women. So most of the respondents were like us, as much as we are like each other. And we're not all like each other, and our feet are not all going to be the same. So she had 500 people like us, and the foot and ankle circumferences for most of these women were about the same. So she could make some generalizations, and it helps us in planning to knit for ourselves or for other people if we understand some of these generalizations. So the foot and the ankle circumference were nearly equal. the foot circumference is generally between 5 and 10% less than the length of your foot. The gusset, which is a measurement in front of your heel, and I'll show you a picture of that in a second, is usually 10 to 15% bigger than your foot circumference. And that's because that part of your foot where your heel is and where your ankle is the widest, thickest part. And so it needs the most. I have somebody moving my car for me, thanks. So the gusset is the part in front of, oh, I could just show you a picture, hang on. Not going to set up my document camera just yet. Okay. Here is a diagram of a foot. And how'd that happen? Document camera because it's easier to see it above. There's too much of a shine. The gusset. My family is so helpful. My daughter's moving my car, but she left me in charge of the pit bull. I'm not sure that's what we were hoping for. Mute myself for just a second so that you don't have to scream. You know, hey, hold please. Okay, that's better. Not in focus yet.
Looks okay.
Does it look okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is her diagram. It's just easier than me getting my foot up here on the table. What I want to point out, is there's a vicious pit bull in my room and she's attacking things. Okay, so the foot circumference here is A, and it is the measurement around the widest part of your foot. And then she says, not including your bunion. So if you, like me, have a bunion, please do not include that measurement in. So you can see this is where your bunion would be. Here's where your toes begin. It is the measurement of the widest point of your foot, not including a bunion, between the bunion and the toes.
That was actually going to be my question.
And you won't be the first person who asked that today. Okay. The second measurement, I feel like that's could be just a squidge more in focus. No. Focus. It really doesn't want to be in focus, but you can see the outlines, and that's the most important part. So this is B, ankle circumference, and here is where she's measuring. So this is the thinnest part of your leg above your rounded ankle bones. This measurement A and this measurement, sorry, this measurement A and this measurement B are roughly equal. And if they're not, you should know, because your socks may need to be adjusted. Also, if you like a tall sock, and I don't particularly like a tall sock because I am the laziest of sock knitters, but if you like a taller sock, this measurement, E, which I'm not asking for, is 6 inches from the floor up your leg. So wherever your ankle circumference is, this is above it. And it can be, according to her notes, it can be upwards of 50% greater. So it could be anywhere from 12 to 50% greater than the ankle circumference. And so that's really important. If you have a big leg, you may have trouble with your socks being too tight or falling down. So the measurements that I am the most interested in, that we found the most useful and the most helpful to know, were A, the foot circumference, B, the ankle circumference, C, the gusset. So here's where the gusset is. I'm praying she comes back and takes her dog. If you take a tape measure around your foot, you want it to go with as little angle, and there's almost a little angle here in the picture, but with as little angle as possible around the foot in front of the leg, in front of the heel. Thanks. Okay, and that's the measurement that's usually about 35% bigger than the foot or the ankle. And then the last measurement is actually the hardest, and it is your foot length. And the recommended way to get your foot length, I love that you are doing this, Janet. I appreciate you so much. The way to get your foot length that she recommends is to put your heel against a wall with a rule and step on a ruler, and then measure on the ruler the length of your foot. It's nearly impossible to do. It's so hard. So what I would call all of these measurements are wishful thinking, moving targets. If you measure yourself, you will get a different measurement every time. It's in, the squishy parts of our body, they're squishy, and they don't measure like, a brick. They measure like parts of your body. And this morning I had 5 people, and we were trying to figure out, how do you measure? Try measuring with your feet flat on the ground, like they would be in a shoe. So when you're doing your foot circumference and your gusset circumference, particularly, your foot should be flat on the ground, or as flat on a surface as you can make it. When you do the ankle circumference, I think that's probably the easiest one. And when you do the foot length, if you find it difficult, I would recommend getting a piece of cardboard like this. Wait, I have it. A piece of cardboard, standing on it and drawing the outline. And we did this as part of a different sock in our group. And we each made these outlines, and the recommendation was to make the cardboard, we did cutouts. And you can see where my toes were. We were supposed to hold the pencil as perpendicularly as possible. So it was supposed to be, I'm going to go back to the screen. Okay, so here's my foot. It's like this. It's laying flat on the floor. So with your feet held equal distant, flat on the floor, standing on one piece of cardboard, kind of like this, you want to draw as closely around without angling the pen in too far, like at a extreme angle. You want to get it just as closely around the outside of your foot as possible. That's an easier way of measuring, and you can do it for both feet. If you have a piece of cardboard that doesn't have a Starbucks thing on the back of it, you could measure on the same piece of cardboard. What we ended up doing was cutting out only one foot. And so you could cut out only one foot, probably the bigger foot. Because if you have a choice between your bigger foot and your smaller foot, your socks are going to fit better if you make them to fit your bigger foot. So those are the 4 measurements. Any questions about those? How are we doing for time? Oh, we're good. The second thing I want to say about the measurements is I put it at the bottom of the page on the handout that you can print out, but at the very bottom of the page are the can't think of the word. Such a long day. Are the
Fractional.
fractions converted into decimals.
Mhm.
And so I put them right there. Measure to the nearest 1/8 of an inch unless you're Canadian and you are measuring to the nearest centimeter. If you are measuring to the nearest 1/8 of an inch, convert them to the decimal as you fill them in. Okay, so if it's an 8 1/4, you'll put 8.25. If it's 9 1/3, don't do 9 1/3. Unless you can figure out 9 1/3. I can't figure out 9 1/3 from the measurements. It's not like my measuring cup. The tape measure only has it in equal amounts. Okay, so that's the first part, and those are the measurements you really need to know for fitting your socks, because if your ankle circumference is greatly different than your foot circumference, you can adjust your knitting to make that happen. If your gusset is bigger than 35% compared to your foot circumference or your ankle circumference, then you can adjust your heels particularly to make it fit better. You can make your heels a little bit bigger. And there are different ways with different kinds of heels that we do that you can make adjustments. The next thing that we're going to do is swatch for the sock. And the sock that we are doing calls for fingering weight or sock weight yarn. And size US 1.5 needles. And they want us to get a gauge of 9 stitches the inch. So not everybody knits the same. Not everybody will get 9 stitches to the inch on a 1.5 needle. But you may like how the fabric comes out on a 1.5 needle. And so we're going to find our gauge. We're going to do a gauge swatch and find our gauge. So I like to do it not based on the pattern, but based on the yarn and the needles that you like to use. And we're going to work from there. And we're going to use the measurements of your foot and your actual gauge to figure out which size of sock you're going to make. So on the second part of the handout that's on the website, it says make your gauge swatch. And to make your gauge swatch, we're going to cast on a known number of stitches, and we're going to work for a known number of inches and record how many, sorry, we're going to work for a known length. So we're going to work for 3 inches. So we're going to cast on. Do you want to put it in the chat? Okay, so we're going to cast on 40 stitches. And so here's the handout. We're going to cast on 40 stitches with the yarn and the needles that you want to use. We are not using single points for this swatch. I really intend for you to use the needles that you're going to use for the socks. So if you want to use 1.5s, or if you prefer to use smaller or bigger needles, if you know that you're a loose or a tight knitter, go ahead and make your adjustments, but you're going to use the actual needles. So either double points, magic loop, or 2 circulars. Natalie, you have a question? You're still on mute.
Sorry, that was actually what I was just going to ask you, if it mattered what kind of needles. So you just answered my question. Thank you.
You're welcome. So the whole time that we do sock club, I'm not going to tell you how to knit your socks in the round. If you want to do magic loop, do magic loop. If you want to do double points, do double points. If you want to do 2 circulars, do 2 circulars. If you need help picking, I'm happy to recommend magic loop, and somebody else will be happy to recommend double points, and somebody else will be happy to recommend 2 at a time. The reason I like magic loop is that I lose my double points, I break my double points, and I drop my double points. I don't like 2 at a time, two needles at a time, because I'm cheap and I don't want to buy a second pair of needles. So, and that's from somebody who owns a yarn shop. So I don't have great reasons for not using them. I think they're all fine ways of working in the round on a small circumference like a sock. So I don't want to sway somebody from something they really enjoy. If you like working with double points, I think that's great. I don't have a problem with it at all. I like to think that we're flexible in this group, and you will find that there are some techniques that you cannot do on double points as easily, particularly the cast-ons for toe-up socks. You will need to use a circular needle for those. Okay. So we're going to cast on 40 stitches with the yarn and the needles we're going to use. And I love my punctuation absence here. Knit 1 row and then slide the stitches to the right end of the needle. In other words, we're going to work this sort of like an I-cord with only the knitted side of the fabric facing us. We're never going to turn the work to the purl side and go back. And the reason is we're never going to do that in our socks, except on the heels. We're only going to be working on the outside, the knit side, or the front facing side of the fabric. So I really want to know what your stockinette gauge is when it's all knit stitches. Different knitters carry their yarn in different ways. They make their knit stitches sometimes very differently than their purl stitches. And so somebody's knit and purl gauge can be very different. And if that's the case, we don't want to take the purl gauge into consideration on the socks. We only want to know what the knit gauge is. When I've done that in the past, so this is a swatch here. And essentially what I'm saying is we're going to knit across and then carry the yarn behind and knit across again. And we're just going to move the swatch back over to the other end of the needle so it's ready to be knit again. Does that make sense to everybody? I see some nodding. Sandy is not nodding.
No, I'm not nodding.
I'm not nodding. Okay, so Sandy, if I knit
Not
across,
nodding either.
if I knit across this,
Mhm.
and normally what you would do is you'd turn it and then you'd purl back. Okay, what if you don't turn? How do you get the yarn back over to this side? We're just going to carry it behind. We're gonna, I wish I thought of this.
Hey, I'll stop in, don't worry.
Okay, so we're going to knit across these stitches and then loosely threading the yarn behind. We're going to start again at the knit side. So the back of our swatch, we moved everything this summer and I can't find my actual swatch from when we started Sock Club, and I thought I could, so I apologize. But instead of having edging, the swatch will have strands that carry back and forth. And when we're done, we're going to cut them.
Got it.
Okay, and so that way we can just see the knitted side of our fabric. And what will happen is our edge stitches will be a little bit loose, And if they're super loose, we won't count them. So we'll start with 40. You can tighten up your edge stitches from being too loose by knitting through the back of the loop, or you could just omit that and just knit them, and we'll omit counting the first and the last stitch. And
Okay.
we'll just do our numbers with 38. So we're going to do 3 inches. And the reason we're going to do 3 inches, this is about a 4-inch swatch, but the cast on can distort the gauge. And we're going to do 3 inches of stockinette, and then we're going to do 1 inch of ribbing. And the ribbing can distort the gauge. So if you only do a little bit of stockinette, there's not enough to really check the gauge across. So I want there to be a good section so that we can measure horizontally across the middle of that section and get the most accurate measurement that we can. So 3 inches of stockinette followed by 1 inch of knit 1, purl 1 ribbing. And this is the best time if you want to record your rows. You can count your rows as you go for your 3 inches and record it there. Otherwise, we have to turn it over, get our magnifying glasses out, and count the rows on the back of our swatch, which to me, this is the easiest place to count them, is on the purl side, because I can sort of use my fingernails and creep up. But I need a magnifying glass and I need a bright light. So if you can count them as you go, you're in better shape. So we're going to do 3 inches of stockinette on the 40 stitches, and then 1 more inch in knit 1, purl 1 ribbing, and record that number. And then we're going to bind off loosely in ribbing. And then we'll cut the yarn across the back of the swatch. So we'll cut that stranded yarn across the back, trim it to about 2 inches. We're going to take our swatch and we're going to submerge it in warmish water, coolish, warmish water. Water not so cold that it will make your hands hurt, but not so hot that it would affect the wool. So lukewarm. Submerge and let the yarn become completely saturated. We really want it to relax from any effect of your knitting. We want to see what the actual blocked measurement is of your swatch. So once it's completely saturated, and that can take a couple minutes or for a few minutes, you're going to drain the water out, or take it out of the water, and you're going to push as much. You can push it with a towel, you can blot it with a towel. I don't want you to wring it. I don't want you to stretch it. I don't want you to pull it. I just want you to blot the water out as much as possible and then leave it somewhere flat to dry. Try to flatten it and let it dry. Stockinette has a tendency to roll up. This one has garter stitch edges. I don't even want garter stitch edges. So there is a tendency of stockinette to roll up. You can take a cloth, like a dish towel, get it moist, get it wet, and use an iron, and you can steam the square to make it flat. And that's all I want, is for it to dry flat and for it to be laying as flat as possible. I've just said all of that. And then we're going to measure, and we're going to measure across the stitches. So I don't know how many stitches are on here. This was a swatch for something else. It's probably 20. I mean, it's probably not anything near to 38. But what you'll do, put all my rulers away somewhere. I just had them in my hands. Luckily, they're not too far. Okay, so you're going to measure across the middle of the stockinette side. I'm not as concerned with the gauge of your ribbing. I just want you to know how your ribbing looks in that needle, and I want you to know how many rows to 1 inch. So you're going to measure across the stockinette part of through the stockinette part, and notice on my ruler here that my first marking is not at the very edge. I think that's right. So you want to make sure that you're looking at the ruler accurately, and you want to get a measurement across to the nearest 1/8 of an inch. So this is 3 6/8, 3 3/4. And then when we measure that, we can record it here. Again, convert the 1/8 of an inch to a decimal place. And I put this here, do your beginning and end stitches seem untidy? Consider omitting them and only measure across the more even stitches. So if you're omitting the first and the last stitch, then it will be the 38 stitches internally that you're measuring. Okay, and then we can find our stitch gauge. Stitch gauge is the number of stitches divided by the width in inches to the nearest 1/8 of an inch across the middle of the stockinette section. So we're going to record that here. So we're going to take our number of stitches, which is either 38 or 40, and the measurement we just took in number 1, and we're going to divide them to get our stitch gauge. So let's say our stitch gauge turns out to be 9.3. That's what we'll write in here. The row gauge, we recorded our number of rows up here. So we'll take that measurement divided by 3 inches or whatever your actual length is, and you'll come out with your row gauge. So then we can calculate what our cuff, this is a top-down sock. So we can calculate which size of sock cuff we want to shoot for. This particular pattern has like 5 different sizes. So this is a good range. So you're going to calculate your sock cuff size by multiplying your ankle circumference. It could also be your foot circumference if they're nearly the same, but your ankle circumference times 0.9, that's what your actual cuff circumference should be. Okay, so again, if your ankle circumference was 10, which would be not your ankle circumference, but times 0.9, then the actual circumference that you want to get is 0.9, or sorry, is 9 inches. 10 inches times 0.9 gives you 9 inches. And then we're going to multiply that by our actual gauge, our actual stitch gauge up here. So if it's 9.7345, then we're going to multiply this number by 9.7345. And that will give us the ideal number of stitches. And then we're going to pick one that's divisible by 8 or 4, depending on the sock pattern that we're using. And the whole point of that is so that we have a sock that can be divided in half and decreased in the ways that socks are made. And so that is traditionally and typically done by having our total number of stitches be divisible by 8 or 4. So for example, if my ankle measurement times 0.9 was 7.988 inches, and my stitch gauge was 9.21, then I multiply those together and I get 73.56 stitches. Well, I can't cast on 73.56 stitches, so I can only choose to be divisible by 4 or 8. The closest one to that is 72. Okay, or you can look at, here's my ideal number. If we look at a pattern, the small is 60 or 64, the medium is 68, the large is 72, and the largest side is 76. So I would pick the one that comes closest to that. And I would say that I would pick the 72. I would round down, I'm closer to the smaller size. And then you can repeat it for the other ankle. If there is a significant difference between your 2 legs, you're going to have to pick one or make not matching socks. And we decided last year that we don't want to make not matching socks. We want to be able to pull either sock out of the drawer and put it onto either foot without worrying about it. So one of the things that we learned, this is a lot of math. This is the only time we're going to do all of this math in Sock Club. Once you have an idea of what your gauge is and what it's like, you can check it or not check it. But I will tell you the best place to check it is on an actual sock. This is the best you can do without actually making a sock to figure out how it's going to fit. The best way to figure out how a sock is going to fit is to cast on your actual sock and try it on your actual foot. The second best way is to cast on your actual sock and try it on your pretend foot. So that's another option. And the third best way is this way. So like I said before, gauge, measurements, these things are all moving targets. They change on a regular basis. The best way to make things fit is to try them on regularly. And socks are one of the easiest things to try on regularly. Again, this is another reason why I like the Magic Loop and the 2 circulars. They're much easier to try on as you go. If you want to try on with double pointed needles, you'll want to use larger double pointed needles, longer double pointed needles. If you're on short double points, they will not accommodate a foot going through your sock. Okay. I have a dog crawling under my legs. Hi, buddy. Hi, you're slipping. Oh, there, sweet. Go back on your bed. Go back on your bed. Sorry. This is the joy of working from home. My elderly dog is having trouble standing up straight, so I'm going to put him back on his bed. Come here, buddy. Here's your good boy. Can you stay there? He heard Dad, and he thinks it's dinner time. Okay. I think I've covered all of the things. Does anybody have any questions? We're going to cover how to cast on in the first class. You are welcome to start sooner if you feel that you're ready to. I'm not going to yell at you. But if you don't know how to cast on or work in the round or any of those things, that will be covered. I'll show a cast on. Joining in the round. I'm going to try and do both the DPN and the 2 circulars, and then I'll have Magic Loop. I'll have my stitches on Magic Loop. Is there anybody who needs a demonstration particularly of that? No?
No, but I've got a question, Beth.
Sure.
You did say that once we go back on the Sock Club site, that the January 3rd date will have the printout up. I can go in and get that. Is that right?
It's on there now.
It is, okay. I tried to print it out from the screen here and I couldn't, so, okay.
Did you hit the see or click here for the note?
No, I just did it. It's okay. We don't have to waste time on this. I'll look and I can't.
Did
find it.
anybody else get it printed out? Did anybody try to get it printed out? Okay.
I did.
Augusta got it printed out. So there's an underlined word note at the very end of the sentence of January 3rd. That's the link to click.
Okay.
I will try and make it more obvious. We'll go back in and try and make it more obvious. And the note is the handout. So I'll change it to handout. That would be a better word. It was early. I think that's everything. I feel like I'm forgetting something that I said this morning that was really smart, and I apologize, but I'm no longer smart. The wine fairy never came, so. Any thoughts or questions, or yeah, thank you. I'm gonna change back. I am delighted to be doing this again. I got to pick patterns in advance this year. which I didn't do last year because we never knew from minute to minute how it was, we didn't know what last year was going to do. And I don't know that we know, I was thinking about it today. I don't think we know what this year is going to do. I think, the store we're not in lockdown. We're not going to lockdown, we don't think, but another store, a second store in our area is closed this week because they had a COVID case among the staff. And we're aware that we're vulnerable to that as well. And we're going to continue on Zoom if we can't do it in the store. And we'll do curbside again, and we'll do the best we can. If we have to close for a minute, we'll close for a minute. We'll see what happens. We've tried to plan this so that if you just want to do socks, you can just do socks this year. But we had a number of people in the group last year who finished. Laura, I'm thinking about you. Who finished and got through their projects in a really, really timely way. And so I want to make sure that you have other things you can do and you don't always have to be doing socks. So we introduced the Year of Hats. The Year of Hats came out in 2019 and it is working. If you want to work with something thicker, there it is. And we told the Instagram live group today that this will be the 20% off yarn next week. So the Year of Hats is a set of patterns. It's 12 patterns from Kelburn Woolens. It uses the Germantown yarn, which is a very traditional non-superwash yarn. It's really a lovely yarn, and I like it very much. I've made several hats, including my current winter hat, which is part of the Year of Hats. This is March. We looked at the list of patterns and we were delighted to see that the January hat is too hard to start with if you're not an advanced knitter. And so we're not starting with the January hat, we're starting with the July hat. And so you're welcome. You won't have to do baubles and traveling cables and a provisional cast on in the first hat. And if you're sorry about that, I apologize. We will get to it in the year. So we've changed the order of the Year of Hats. And then in addition to that, for people who would like to try new stitches or who are newer knitters or crocheters who would like to expand some of their stitches, Pam is going to be offering the knit and the crochet block of the month on all other Mondays of the month. And that is towards either doing a dishcloth or a washcloth or a hand towel. You could make it longer to make a hand towel, or you could choose to do it in a thicker yarn and make a blanket or an afghan with it. Those are two separate groups. One is the knitted block of the month, and they're working from Michelle Hunter's building blocks. And then the crochet block of the month is working from an Annie's Attic pattern called the Stitch Sampler Afghan. And they're going to do 12 of the 30 patterns in the Stitch Sampler Afghan. So that's what the other weeks are. Sock Club will meet, I think it's, I'm not looking at the page, but it will meet once a month. I think it's the third Monday of the month regularly. So our actual cast on will be in January, and then in February, it will be the finishing of the sock. So we'll have 2 separate hours to work on each sock together. And if you think of things you want to see or questions you have that you want to know, you can send them to me either by email or call the store or show up. You all look ready for night night. Have I missed anything? Is there any questions? You ready? Ready to cast on? Did everybody get their foot measured in? Thank you. That's great.
No.
No.
Do consider getting somebody to help you, especially with the foot length. If you have a second person around who can, wield a pen, that would be very helpful. Go scrounge an Amazon box and turn it into something really useful. We did these actually for every member of our family. I made them all stand on pieces of cardboard. Again, it's helpful if they're standing even footed. Not just on one foot, not moving a foot out of their way, because you really want the pressure on the feet in the way that it would be for walking in a shoe. It's lovely to see all your faces. I can't wait to meet some of you in person. Is anybody from not in this area? Not in the Cleveland area? Augusta is? And Donna? Welcome. Thank you for joining us. And thank you all for joining us. I'm delighted to see such a great group. I hope that you all are excited about making socks together. All righty, it's 7:01. I won't keep you, but we'll be back on Zoom. We'll be back on Instagram next week at 6. What time? 5. And we'll be back on Zoom next week at 6 for the Year of Hats. I will be leading the Year of Hats. So I will be here if you're interested in doing it. And those patterns are free and linked already on the website. So have a great week, and
Thanks.
I'll see you on the 24th.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.